Well, my friends will feel it's their appointed duty. They keep trying to tell me that all you want to do is use me. And for copyright reasons, I can't really go into more of that song. But just know, there's more where that came from.
Were you singing this, Joey?
Yeah, I'm just singing it. Just doing it.
Christopher, I have a request from our studio. Can you play? We might be violating, I'm sure we're violating copyright protection here. Maybe just a few bars of the old Barney Miller theme song.
Oh, shucks. No. Oh man, I had it right the first time. I haven't done it in so long. But it's something like that, right? Something like that. Hopefully not exactly like that, though. I don't have my loop station with me. Otherwise, I would just improvise and jam out.
You may still improvise and jam out.
All right, sounds good. So this first one, not that I came prepared or anything, but I met God. He gave me $1. I met his wife. She told me to call her. She thought that I could make her scream and holler. 'Cause she got tired of praising the Father. 'Cause I'm solid, I'm out of sight. Give me your love and I will sure enough do you right. And there's more where that came from, too. But I have a nice big plate of pepperoni and cheese and crackers in front of me. I'm going to have a nice little piece of cheese. Piece of cheese. Stinky cheese, too. Did you know that we already talked about this last week? That's a foot cheese that I just ate right now. It smells like feet because it has butyric acid on it. I'm so Italian. Such a Guido. I'm so proud of myself.
You really are.
Something like that. Okay. I'm just going to play some light jazz chords. I've been working on this lately. And then I just keep forgetting where it goes from there. But I can't really play that into the show. Hold on a second, my computer just died, so I need to... There we go. Well, I'm in the mood to do this.
Here we are once again at the place. This is the place for intellectual, spiritual, and scriptural honesty. Honey, this is all about ramping up for Dr. Shook tonight. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm excited about him being here, and actually, to ramp up for Dr. Shook is a little overkill because he, in and of himself, is ramped up enough to carry it. You know what I'm saying? He's excited about coming, and we're excited about having him. So we're just adding some icing on the cake, I think.
I think so. I think that he has enough to offer to make this event extremely powerful, and I hope that we can encourage people who might have an opportunity actually to come to Pensacola and get a motel and enjoy the surroundings here to do that this weekend. He will be with us from the 24th through the 28th. With that said, we want to do a little bit of talking about the New Covenant group tonight, and so we've asked Christopher, and I keep calling him Maute because I enjoy my E-class vowel, especially with his name sounding like a long A-class vowel, but I just think it sounds good. And so welcome, Christopher, to the show.
Well, thank you very much. How's everybody doing tonight?
Marvelous, wonderful. We certainly are enjoying the bass. Your singing is awesome. You do have so many abilities. Wow, that's so exciting. We also have a new person in the audience. He has the same name, by the way. We call him now. He's no longer Michael Fulford, but he's Babyface Michael Fulford. And so welcome, Michael.
Let's get a shot of that.
Yeah, I got a little too close to a fire.
I wish we could get a close-up of Michael. He has that same chin that Greg Bray has. And we were asking whether that was an atheist thing or what.
I think it's the mark of the beast.
Well, he claimed that it was
an
atheist thing. And so...
that and fedoras.
Yeah. And so it's rather amazing. What are your thoughts at this point before we get started, Christopher? Share something.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to Dr. John Shook showing up to the Florida studios so that some fantastic footage of his thoughts and clarity and articulated philosophy can be captured and recorded. So, I'm really looking forward to having a discussion about that.
It's going to be a lot different. We've had him on Skyping in, and other hosts have as well. But having him just sitting here in person, you can see the passion and hear the exuberance, and he can really nail some things down. And I hope there will be a lot of people here to be able to ask him some questions, and we'll have a question line. And it makes all the difference in the world to have somebody in studio.
Yeah.
I think so. He's so much a teacher. He told me on the phone, and we've had various conversations, that he wants to spend a lot of time not just, in conversations, but he would like to do some of what he does best, and that is to lecture. And so we are going to be capturing various things on camera. We are doing some experiments tonight, and so we've made this show very, very capable of failing. And please understand, we have people hitting light bulbs, microphones, and all kinds of things because we have rewired so many things here in order to get ready for actually filming and doing a live broadcast at the same time. Many of you guys may not know what goes into that, but it's not like just having a television show. It's very much about trying to find balance between something that we can put actually in a documentary plus put on this broadcast. And so be patient with us. Tonight is just a night in which we are going to be trying various things. And so if you're getting a bad audio feed or whatever, please call in and gripe at Joey. Joey, he has many problems. And I really enjoyed the song you were singing about Joey a while ago, Christopher.
He was very deserving of it.
Yeah,
All the praise.
Yeah, all the praise, all the glory forever and ever. Yeah, I thought that was awesome. I want to talk about what the New Covenant group might have to offer. I'm listening to various shows. I'm very interested in, and I will market this because I think it's worth people taking the time to watch. Alex Botten has a marvelous show called Fundamentally Flawed. He also has a co-host by the name of Dr. Matt Hunt and also Jim Gardner. And they do a tremendous job. But before I try to plug his show that much, he does have a need right now. In the UK, they do have wonderful medical help, but yet at the same time, like we here in America, sometimes things are just too slow. And so they are looking for some kind of charity organization that might help them. That is, so his wife, Catherine, can actually have an operation that is for her gallbladder. And so if you're listening and if you know of anyone who could help that situation, get the right people connected so that can go easily for her. She's in a lot of pain right now. And so learn to be a compassionist. Learn what it means to say, let's not just say, hey, we love each other and we embrace each other and we accept each other. Let's make something happen here because his wife is in extreme pain. And I wanted to say something about that tonight. What say you, honey?
I agree. Jim spoke of their marvelous health care at a Google Hangout. And while that is more than likely true, since he would know, I have heard of these instances of people having to wait, months and even years. And actually, I think a woman just died recently over there, and I'm not sure what her position was. She was part of the NHS. She might have been a mayor of a town at one time, but she actually died waiting on an operation. And I'm not sure that that's the cause of her death, but the family did say she just got sicker and sicker and sicker until maybe when she had it, she was just too sick to recover from it.
Right.
And so, we all have our challenges, and nothing is perfect. And it's one thing to think about when you are rooting for universal health care.
One of the things that they're asking her to do is to wait 4 months before she has anything done. And I think that that's sad. It should never be done that way. However, if you have the ability to get them in contact with the right people, please send us a private message, email, or call us. The phone number to call would be 850-572-7441. And so with that said, I would like to talk about Fundamentally Flawed for a few minutes. Would you be game for that, Christopher?
Let's, please. So Fundamentally Flawed has a fantastic format where they take on Alex Botten and Dr. Matt Hunt and Jim Gardner and also M.K. Skeptic, I believe is the other gentleman. They take on theists, they're atheists, and apologists specifically, and they hold their feet to the fire and expect them to be able to articulate their positions in such a way that it can satisfy a logical argument, and they're pretty deft at disassembling bad arguments. And it's really entertaining to watch them because they don't mean to be disrespectful. They do call shenanigans when they see it, but in as kind a way as they can. They're trying to pull in, people to watch them. So they're trying not to be too alarmist. And I really like the way that they handle talking to people that they disagree with. I think that it's a little bit more, let's say, assertive than I would handle it, but I love watching it. I think that they do a great job doing what they do. What do you think, Dr. Jones?
I think Joey's messing up the program once again. Is Joey messing up the program? It was already messed up. I just walked over here. He actually pulled the plug on my microphone, Christopher. I mean, Joey did this. And now it's fixed. Yeah.
Purposely.
And so he pulled the plug and plugged it back in, and he claimed that he healed our audio mixer. I mean, that's just the way that Joey does. Now, I think that you're right about fundamentally flawed. I think that I really don't see them going against theism that much, as opposed to going against these radical notions of theism. I think that there's a difference between a radical theist and just a theist, if you will. I think that sometimes models of theism could be said to be egalitaric to models of philosophy.
Okay.
That is, if we look at it diachronically, etymologically, etc. And so my point is, many times they are talking with, for instance, creationists. And I wanted to ask you tonight, what are your ideas concerning creation?
As far as my personal perception of creation?
No, I'm simply, I know that you're an atheist, and I know that you would not agree with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I would agree that, you would say, that doesn't sound like anything reasonably that I could wrap my mind around. And I would think that Michael Fulford would say amen to that. Would you agree, Michael?
Amen.
Amen. Okay. So I'm getting atheists to say amen to what I'm saying tonight. That's good. So with that said, I want to know what you perceive about Genesis 1, just out of curiosity tonight, because I think that Jim, Alex, Dr. Hunt, and also MK Skeptic, I think they're taking a right approach, that is, in trying to ask these people, why are you making these particular kinds of rationalistic arguments and trying to make this great leap of faith over to the Bible instead of the Quran or whatever, and trying to make all these claims, and then on top of it, you're going to make the claim that God created all of this stuff maybe 6,000 years ago. And some creationists will take it back and spin an old earth theory. So my question to you would be, what are your thoughts on all this stuff about creation?
I find it to be super interesting, right? Origins is something that people get caught by the bug of, and some people don't. I must admit that as an atheist, I find the origins questions super interesting. I think that they're one of the more interesting things that you can study. It's one of the core metaphysical questions that I find interesting. So, of course, the fact that people have individual differences about how they perceive the origins question and how they resolve the origins question, I want to explore to the nth degree. And that's why I have an interview show instead of a non-interview show. So because I want to explore people's ideas about that. So the fact that people could have a position that puts the age of the earth at such an order of magnitude differently than the calculations that an epistemological method like science puts it. I think that Richard Dawkins says it's something like saying the distance between Los Angeles and Manhattan is the same distance between Brooklyn and Manhattan. I mean, it's just like, it's that radically different, saying that 4.5 billion years is the same as 6,000 years. The difference between the age of the earth, so radically different between creationists and scientists. So how do they account for that cognitive dissonance? And I think that that'll be an interesting question to bring up to John Shook when he gets here, cognitive dissonance, and how people resolve that. But the whole creation question and evidence for it is what got me interested in apologetics, with Kent Hovind. So the whole evidentialist apologetics branch is what brought me into looking at fundamentalist Christians and the fact that there is a cottage industry built around media and presentations and books and theories and speakers and circuits where people can speak and talk about creation science and young earth creationism and things like that. I find it absolutely fascinating.
You know, I believe that that's where the atheist and the theist are at a level playing field, because neither one can actually prove the very origin of anything. They can say that, you know, that this happened, that, but where did the very beginning come from? I mean, that's the way I look at it from arguments that I've heard.
Oh, and I think that's the beginning of a great discussion, you know, and of many great discussions that have been had at coffee houses and pubs and over dinners and, you know, between friends,
right.
And sometimes maybe didn't end up as friends at the end of the conversation, but I think that's such a fun topic to get into because it has so many ways to unravel. But it takes a community like the New Covenant Group and you know, platforms like Fundamentally Flawed for that kind of conversation to spin itself in such a way that friends can enter it and come out of it as friends still.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, one of the things that I'm concerned about, and I want you to share your thoughts on this. I think sometimes people start talking about evolution, and I think that sometimes young earth creationists get upset because they think that evolution somehow is talking about origin. Do you think that evolution at this point in history is actually discussing the issue of origin, or is it just talking about the basics of how things have changed and something that we can somewhat observe?
Well, I mean, evolution, you know, there's a difference between evolution and theories of origins. Theories of origins include abiogenesis, and the theory of evolution technically is, you know, the theory of what happened once things got here. And once things got here, they followed this mechanism that we're still trying to understand, known as the theory of evolution. And how things got here is a completely separate question.
Right.
But using the same kind of tools that allow us to project forward in time, using a trajectory and a model that allow us to, you know, forwardly project. We can use those same tools to project a trajectory backwards in time. And that right now, the models that fit that kinds of forensic historical science based on the observational tools that we have available to us shows evolution to be the best fit according to the evidence that exists.
I agree. One of the concerns that I have about dealing especially with theists concerning the Bible, that is in the book that we call Bereshith. Technically it's not called Genesis, that is from the standpoint of how the Jews look at their own text. And so they would refer to this particular book as Bereshith. And so when I read this, and let me read just the first three words. This is Bereshith bara Elohim. And this is very important to understand in my opinion, and I have spoken much about what an abjad is. An abjad is simply a writing system without vowels. And it's also a nominal structured system. And with that said, what you have is something that's not complete. That is to make sense of what the actual authors of the text actually penned. There have been various attempts at pointing the text, that is, supplying the vowels to the text, and this has failed more times than not. And so over the decades of people wrestling with what we call the abjad. People have simply practiced a system of revocalization, simply to put what they want to into it. In other words, it's a form of eisegesis, reading something into it that the author never intended. And people are coming up with an idea of vowel structure. And so most of your versions today are based upon the premise of something called the Masoretic text. And so the Masoretes gave us a pointing system that's much different than the other pointing systems prior to. And even many of the reformers renounced this pointing system and went to the church and stated this could not be done because it wasn't legitimate to even think that we could even contemplate this text. However, people seem drawn to a text that technically we can't understand. I keep saying that it's much like abstract art. And so I keep hearing people, in fact, the last gentleman that Alex Botten had on his show, he kept saying that we are finding all of this historical evidence of this ancient text, the abjad. And there is no way to suggest that whatever we find in archaeology can match the text unless we actually eisegete this particular writing system, read something into it. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a good science at all. But my point is, just for the sake of argument tonight, I would like to take the Masoretic text and just make a couple of statements and get your thoughts on this. But my awesome looking woman, my wife, Rhonda Sue, she's going to make some statements. Go for it. Honey.
Well, I know that Michael, babyface Michael Fulford is chomping at the bit to talk about origin briefly because we've all had a snippet of a chance. So give us your best shot.
Well, when you talk about origin, it all depends on which origin you're talking about, of course. I mean, if you want to talk about the universe, that's a whole different ballgame. The origin of life is another thing, the science of abiogenesis. And I'm personally of the opinion at the moment that we will never know how life got started on the planet. We have a lot of different theories and a lot of different demonstration in terms of experiments of how it could get started. But unless we have a time machine, we don't know which one of those might actually be the way it got started. As far as the universe is concerned, our physics breaks down. Our science breaks down when you get close enough to the origin point of the universe. It no longer, we may never know how that started. We have some good ideas again, but you're trying to deal with something that happened before the laws of science as we know actually came about. So we may, whereas with we have good ways of testing the origin of life on Earth, there's probably no way we'll ever get to this point, at least not within any time, a realistic time frame, like I can see this in 50 years, of how the universe got started. Now, when it comes to things like the creationists, there are anything that you will make a claim about that we can look at, you can test. You can, I have a baseball. Can you demonstrate that you have this baseball? Well, no, you have to take it on faith. Well, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to say, okay, show the baseball. Okay, well, creationists have this claim. There was everything was created on the same day. There was a flood. These other things as well. And we can actually check that, and we can see, well, if there was a flood, we would see this. When we look out into the world, we don't see this. We see instead a general increase in complexity among life forms over time. We see mass die-offs of life forms at different points in the fossil record. If we don't see this, or if you had a massive flood, you'd have this situation where you'd have all these fossils all at the same time in the same strata, and then nothing after that. We don't see that. There are other things too. We would see a mass die-off in the ocean as the salinity decreases. So you'd have coral would die off. Coral is very important to the ecosystem in the ocean, so we don't have that. We have a continuous amount of coral. In fact, somebody was able to go back and look at fossil coral, and the idea is that Earth's rotation has slowed over time. And this was based off of a process we can measure. And if this was the case, then coral, which grows at a certain time during the day, would show this over a certain time period, and was able to get samples of fossilized coral and show that the Earth is slowed. The difference with creationism is it's not shown that. Now, why do people believe it? Because creationism tells people why they are special. And that, to me, that's why I love mythology. Mythology is about telling people why they are important. You don't hear stories in Greek myth, any other mythology, about why other cultures are important. You hear stories about why their culture is important. And in Jewish mythology, of course, you have everyone's descended from Adam and Eve, and then from Noah, and then the Jewish tribe itself is a selected portion of those people that have descended in a straight line from Adam. And that's all of this is showing how you are unique. And I've mentioned this before, is that I don't like that. I don't like being told that you're unique because of something outside of your control. We all are unique because of things we do. But I do think mythology is important because it tells you a lot about the culture that developed these ideas and stories. So I think that there's two different things. There's the important personal narrative that comes from creationism, and then there's the actual facts, which is what you get from science.
Well, you don't think when a child is born that they are unique and they didn't have a single thing to do with it?
A child, when they're born, is born into circumstances beyond their control. Those circumstances can make them unique. A child born to a wealthy family is going to be in a much different set of circumstances than a child born to a poor family. In both situations, though, they are probably very important to their parents. But in and of being a child themselves, they're not unique yet. They have the potential for uniqueness.
I think when you become a father, you'll think differently.
Well, I'm not saying that a child is not unique to the parents. It's certainly unique to the parents. If you step back away from any kind of emotional ties, which I don't recommend doing, but if you do step back from all the emotional ties, there's nothing that's going to make a child unique unless outside of the circumstances that they're born into. As a child grows older, as the parents teach it, as the people around it teach it, and as it begins to gain its own understanding of itself, that's what makes a person unique.
What about fingerprints?
Actually, no. It's a little funny thing. No one actually checked to see if fingerprints are unique. They just kind of all believe it. And the other thing is that fingerprints really isn't that good of a science. If you look at the detectives who over time have been brought back to retry cases that the evidence was decided on fingerprints, they it's about equal to chance of whether they'll get it right again or not.
Okay, Christopher, what are your thoughts before I get into this book of Genesis? I don't agree with much of what Michael is saying. I think that he's going out on a limb in various areas,
okay.
But we will save that till later in the show. I want to get your thoughts.
I'm glad people disagree with me.
Well, unfortunately, I couldn't hear Michael for a lot of what he had to say, so I don't know how informed my chiming in would be.
It wasn't worthwhile anyway. Don't worry about it.
No, I'm sure.
That was very interesting.
I'm sure it was awesome. I'll have to check it out on the archive.
So
But we were talking about fundamentally flawed. So if I can just put in my last little 2 cents,
Yes.
I would go back to the fact that for those people who are watching that are not familiar with fundamentally flawed, I would suggest Googling them, and they have their own web page on WordPress, I believe, that archives their episodes. And I think that we're going to start promoting their shows as well on the Cult of Honesty Facebook page.
And you can learn a few new words to disparage someone that they use in the UK. I learned a
things
few.
that I didn't think were an insult.
Yeah, like,
Bell end.
oh yeah, okay. Oh, no,
Bollocks.
no.
I think it's all a lot of fun. But let's, I want to focus in on some of the shows that they have been doing, especially with theists, and I was hoping that Michael would stay directed in that area, and I'm not rebuking you. I'm simply saying that I have much to talk to you about some of the things that you
That's good.
have to say. Because
I haven't watched Fundamentally Flawed yet, so I was trying to.
You haven't. Okay, you're missing.
I wanted
out.
to. I
this
just
is
haven't had time.
Alex Botten. I mean,
I
this
work
guy.
a lot.
Well, I understand that.
I want to.
But let's talk about fundamentally flawed and the people that are brought onto this show. Most of them, that is theists, they hold a particular understanding of creationism. Some of them are young earthers. Am I correct, Christopher?
Indeed. A lot of them are creationists. Many of them young earth creationists, and I think that they've gone through their swath of presuppositionalists as well.
Right. I think the last one was, he seemed almost like a combination of, the potential of a young earth creation and the possibility of an old earth. But he was simply just very, very dogmatic on it has to be a creational model. And I want to talk about the text itself just for a few minutes, if that's fair. What theists are doing to me is very disingenuous to the text. And some of what I will talk about tonight may help, and then it may not mean anything to anyone. Because most theists are going to come from a mindset of something that we refer to in Latin as animine, which means to come from nothing. And so they're suggesting that this creational model is not what I would do if I went out to construct a house. That is, it's a manufacturing process. They're suggesting that God in the beginning, quote unquote, if there is a beginning in this verse or passage, they're suggesting that out of nothing God created something. And whatever that might be turned into these terms that we find in English. However, I don't think that the Jews, to be fair to the Jews, now I understand the Catholic models and the Protestant models want us to think differently, but when you examine A to Z, the way that the Jews have handled their text, and please understand that an abjad was something that they intentionally did. In other words, if you and I sat down and made an agreement, and we said, let's use a system to where we can keep it ambiguous enough to where we will not suffer a lot of liability. That is, we can write things, and as we keep getting older, our kids can't hold it against us. If we word it wrongly, we can simply change it because we're not going to put all the necessary essentials to the structure of the language. So grandpa and great-grandpa, they don't look ignorant. Does that make sense to you? And so if you have, let's say, I've heard this somewhere, 12 tribes. And if you have a tribal system and you're trying to get people to get along and they're moving forward, they go through these killing sprees or whatever, and they really don't want to be sued. And I'm using modern language simply to make a point. If they want to keep out of all of the different liabilities that people want to keep out of, they don't want to bear the responsibility of what they're doing, these people are going to make things as ambiguous as they can. This is very much what the Jews did. And I'm not bragging on it. I'm simply saying it is what it is. And so they had a tradition of actually taking and writing, but not all of their writings were actually originals. We can look at this document called Bereshith, and the way that we know this is how the Jews looked at stuff. I mean, they did not name their books because they felt like they were just authoring something unique, like let's sit around and think of a good name for our book. They would normally take the first word that is in a writing and name it that. And so, however, the writer started writing that particular book or article or whatever you want to call it, these people were doing this. And please keep in mind that they were not writing on paper, they were not typing on a typewriter, or they were not using computers. But these people were using bone, they were writing on bone, stone, and animal hide. And so my question would be, if we can think for a moment, someone writing me a letter, or my wife a letter, and they decided, I don't want to use a lot of vowels. That would just be too many letters to put on bone or stone. But I'm going to use a chisel and something that looks somewhat like a hammer. Do you think that the things that they wanted to say would be kind of mixed up sometimes, since the writing process would take so long?
Of course.
Okay, so we can see that any time that, if it takes me, 35 or 40 minutes to pin out maybe 3 or 4 words, that this is not something that, when writers get juiced up to write, and you're a very good writer, I mean, you want to go for it. Well, back in this day, these people they didn't have that availability, and so we have to, in a sense, kind of respect, where they were. And so when we start looking at the text itself, we're going to find various things in this thing that, so to speak, that theists have gathered together and put it into a form and attributed all of this to Moses. And we're going to find that a lot of this stuff doesn't come directly from First Temple or Second Temple Hebrew or even Aramaic. It actually comes from Ugaritic. And so, for instance, when we read about Noah and the flood, this is a story that wasn't originally written by Jews. This was a story that was borrowed from someone else. The syntax is completely different, and so we see something shoved or inserted into a book. And those of us who can read the languages and examine the text, like I've done for so many years, we can see that this is not the product of a single author. And so I would think that that would make a big difference. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but how many times when we're talking to theists, and I'm talking about atheists talking to theists, how many times do theists actually admit to factors like that in a conversation like, I'm in defense of creation?
Oh, they would never admit to it because it would make their claims fall under themselves. It would make the logic of their claims fall under themselves.
So I'm simply saying, number one, the text is extremely ambiguous because it's an object. And there is no way to find these elements that we really need to recreate the vowel structure. And I don't know of anyone who would argue that we could reasonably do that. And so my point is, since revocalization has always been practiced by everyone involved in translating the text, and they do this simply to satisfy whatever organization or contract that they are in concert with. So putting that on the table, let's move forward. Let's just take one model of the writing. Let's call it the Masoretic text. When we read the Masoretic text, if I start with the very first word, Bereshith, that's adverbial. That is based upon the modeling of that particular, and let me say this, it's extremely synthetic. And it means that this is not really, we don't know for sure that this is the intent of the author, but we do know that if we modeled it synthetically, that this would be somewhat the outcome based upon a synthetic mindset of this kind of modeling. Do you follow?
Yes.
Okay. So if I take the term Bereshith, one of the things that I have to admit to, first of all, is we have something absent, and that would be the definite article. So when I look at my English Bible, I find in the beginning. When I look at my Hebrew text, that is Masoretic text that's already been pointed, and I like using both a pointed and unpointed text. I like looking at all the data, not some. But if I look just at the Masoretic text, I find that we have no definite article. So the insertion of the term "the" is very much, it's bogus. And so out of the convention of theology, there have been grammars written after the fact that are not truly sustainable, that is, in the world in which this was written, that go back and say, oh, this is why the Hebrew-speaking people, that is, of First Temple Hebrew, were suggesting a definite article. Well, in reality, no one who actually knows the language would ever put an article there. So the first thing that we would have to do is to take out the article. So we're not talking about the beginning, we're just talking about in beginning. And since this is adverbial, and it's working in concert, not so much with the subject, but it's working with the verb itself, which is a call perfect verb. Now, since this call perfect verb is not a tense-oriented verb, because First Temple Hebrew and Second Temple Hebrew are tenseless languages. In other words, they deal strictly with aspect. It's similar to action sart, but it's aspect. And so in order for an English mind to understand it, we put it in the context of a tense. And so we use created instead of looking at it aspectually. Do you follow?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're studying other languages have different logic systems. They have different ways of looking at things. They may create, in other words, when I am translating Hebrew, I have to create what's called a deictic center in order for us to recreate a model by which we can look at something efficaciously. But this is not what's talked about on Fundamentally Flawed, is it?
No.
Okay, next point. So, the first word of the text is adverbial. That is, if you're using the Masoretic text. The next word is the term, we said Bereshit bara. We have a verb. The verb is singular. Now, I want you to notice that the noun Elohim is in the plural. Now, the way that the Jews understood the language here, Elohim is very much in the plural, and it's used throughout quote-unquote translations simply as judges. Or you could translate it gods. But what the Protestants and the Catholics did, they took the term Elohim and said, we do not have to have verb and subject agreement. And they started calling this the majestic plural. In other words, it's a form of bullshit. It simply says, I'm going to make up what I want to make up and call it good. And so basically what they're saying is, I can say Elohim in the plural. We do not have to have proper conjugation. This is the inerrant word of God. We don't have to have subject-verb agreement. We can just have Elohim along with this bara, and it's fine. Well, if you're an illiterate, that's possible. And there is only a couple of different ways that you can spin that in Hebrew that would even make sense. Because sometimes in order to create tension, you do use a plural with a singular verb. But that's not in this kind of syntax. And so the demands of this could not be true if we are analyzing this kind of Hebrew. So this creates a conundrum. And the conundrum, go for it. Ask the question.
Is what you're saying that the traditional English translation that we're used to, which goes along the lines of, in the beginning, God created X, Y, and Z, that is a line of crap that more appropriately could be translated as, in beginnings, the judges create?
I would not, I hate interlinears. I don't like this word for word tease, because anytime that you try to say, oh, that word in Hebrew is identical to some word in English, that's where we really mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do not have identical words in Hebrew for identical words in English.
Okay, well, maybe
so,
I took the wrong path. Maybe
no, you're taking a great path, a great point that you're making.
I think the point that I was making was the English translation that we're used to, where in the beginning meaning like the Alpha to the Omega.
Right.
That's what they're talking to.
Right.
The beginning, the in the beginning is an add-on based on a very loose. We're gonna play with translations right now.
Right.
And when it says God created, the fact that create is in the past tense is also fudging linguistics. And the fact that they took a plural, which is Elohim, which could mean judges, and that they willy-nilly made it the majestic plural, and that they could now translate that to mean the word God, and that translates and gets filtered down to how we now understand it as in the beginning God created. That's what you're getting to?
That's part of what I'm getting to, but it gets worse. It gets worse, much worse.
Well, I think I'm on the same page with you so far.
Well, would it be because you mentioned that linguistics is a science, so could it simply be due to the linguistics still developing in terms of translation, the idea of translation models still coming about, and trying to read it as a literal or make a literal translation versus what it was originally intended as, not with the cultural biases that were in place, and not a purposeful misunderstanding of the text?
Okay. For instance, let me read something, and I'm going to turn in my Bible if you'll give me just a moment. And I'm going to turn in my Bible to something else, and for some of you guys who want to get into this, go to John chapter 1. I'm going to read to you something, and I want you to see something that's somewhat working in concert here. Now, in Greek, it reads this way, Christopher. John chapter 1, he says, Enarche in halagos, kai halagos ein proston theon, kai theos ein halagos. Now, let me take that slowly. The first word in that particular verse, en, sounds just like our English word in, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The next word is arche. Now, one of the things that you'll find the Protestants doing, they make a big deal over the article. You have to have the article, because when they talk about the last part of the text, theos ein halagos, people will say, well, we're talking about the word was God himself. And the Jehovah's Witnesses came along and said, well, no, the word was a God because we have no definite article. Well, please understand that Greek only has one article. It doesn't have two. In other words, it doesn't have an indefinite article. It just has an article. And unfortunately, people call it a definite article, and this is clumsy. The only thing close to the indefinite is actually a pronoun called theists. And so when you look at the text itself, what we're talking about is enarche. And what that means is we're simply talking about something that's close to the rhythm of what I'm suggesting now. And I'm getting to a point because this was very much modeled after the Septuagint. The Septuagint wasn't put together, that is, by 70 translators, technically, or maybe two more. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, was actually a work that took process. They did not translate the abjad. They used the abjad only in the sense of saying we are looking at it like abstract art, and they simply went according to oral tradition about the text. So the translation of the Septuagint wasn't of the text itself, but the oral translation of the text. Does that make sense? So if I say that the Septuagint is a translation of Bereshith, that is technically wrong. It's a translation of the oral transmission of what people supposedly were talking about when it came to Bereshith. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so when we read John chapter 1, we don't find the definite article before arche, or the article, should I say. What we find is simply, once again, we have this term that we could say beginning. I would suggest that both Genesis and this book that we call John would be very much in concert in this sense. Possibly the writer, and I really don't know what the writer actually said in the book of what we call Genesis. I have no clue. I don't think anyone does. But to be honest with you, if we were to use the Masoretic text, it would be safer to say that we're talking about at first. And at first what? We can have many first. It doesn't have anything to do with some concept of nemine, out of nothing. It has nothing to do with that at all. Because when you look technically at this, we're looking at a writer who is trying to put something together in a framework to where people can understand that things are a little bit different. Let me give you an example. The writer in John chapter 1, he uses theos, ein, halagos, and in doing so, he does not supply the article before the term theos, not because he doesn't want to say, oh, we're talking about the God, but he's simply making a literary point, that is, of syntax. In other words, when you read Greek, the reason that the Greeks would add the article was to indicate the difference between the predicate nominative and the subject nominative. Since theos and logos are both in the nominative, and since Greek does not follow English word order or structure, the only thing that determines the subject would be which noun has the article. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so my point is, oftentimes I think these conversations could be so much more fruitful if we had a handful of people who would say, well, are we really talking about apples and apples here?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm suggesting that if we're going to talk about Genesis, that is appropriately, that is, let's use the model that is of the Hebrew text that we're talking about. For instance, if we go on in the Hebrew text and we talk about Hashemaim, he says et Hashemaim, which indicates the term et is simply one of these fill-in terms to indicate that you have a direct object of some kind. And so we have Hashemaim. It's in the plural.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, we're talking about the heavens. But note we have et Haharetz, which also we have the conjunction along with the earth. The point being, the Jews never looked at this as a literal context of heavens or earth. For if you read enough about what the Jews were talking about, especially by the time that you get to the days of Jesus, they called their heavens and earth something that was physically located, namely on this planet called Earth. And when you look at the evidence of this writing, it's more likely, I don't know this to be certain because I don't have certitude here, but it's more likely that this is just a preface of a theology that is talking about Hashemaim and Haharetz in the context of their Mecca, if you will, or their Jerusalem. Does that make sense? And so this is extreme metaphor. The setup of this is metaphor simply because of the syntax. And so people who really deal with First and Second Temple Hebrew and really deal with the possibilities that are more likely in the text would suggest this is not talking about a literal heaven or earth or literal heavens and earth. It's simply talking metaphorically because there is an establishment of something. And so you have to use fundamentally several things in play here. We have to use a triliteral approach, which does establish to a certain degree our ability to wrap our minds around how these possibilities may play out, but we can't be certain about any of this. What are your thoughts?
I think that these are the kinds of things that should be brought up to creationists when they try to pull evidence that they seem to have in-depth knowledge about that nobody else seems to know about out of their pockets and try to use that to beat over people's heads like, no, here's the one thing that you didn't look at, because everybody has a blind spot. And I think that the area in which you know most about as far as linguistics go and theology is the very area they have a blind spot about. They want to make claims about the English translation of a Bible that they have no understanding of the historicity of, or the translations or interpretations of, that go beyond the veneer version that they have in their whatever version they're using, the King James version or whatever.
Right.
So they're taking the end point and paying absolutely no attention to the history that went into making that book what it is. And you happen to have all of that knowledge that went into making that book what it is. And they don't want to go into that.
Okay, but the science of the text would demonstrate that it would be foolish to talk about a creation out of nothing. It would be foolish to talk about most of what creationists talk about. And so my point is, this is why you have so many Jews simply sitting back laughing at the Protestants and the Catholics. And I'm just wondering when it would be a good time to approach this, maybe on a show like Fundamentally Flawed, and get into a better conversation concerning these ideas. But I don't know. But you know, it's difficult.
I think that you should address it on Fundamentally Flawed. I think
Well-
that, I think that you should be the person to address it. And I think that Alex might, maybe we should ask Alex if, he has room on this panel one of these times to have Dr. Jones come in and go at bat and see if these arguments work when talking to creationists and see what happens.
That's true. The problem here is, notice that we're taking enough time. We're listening to each other. But when you're trying to have a conversation with a creationist, it's hell. It's difficult. And so we have all this interruption, yada, yada, yada. Honey, I want you to jump in. I think that
No, you don't.
Oh, I don't. Okay.
Creationism is kind of a recent phenomenon when it comes to theology. If you look at the kind of the earlier interpretations of it, before about the 1800s, when science really started gaining a foothold in trying to explain the world, I did a double check here, and it seems like most people kind of took it allegorically. And I do wonder what it is about that time period, because there were a lot of things that were allegorical before then that were taken to not be a literal interpretation of things that became that people around that time started taking seriously, like Atlantis. Until Ignatius Donnelly, no one really took Atlantis seriously as a continent. Go ahead.
I agree with Babyface.
I'm never going to live this down.
No, you're not.
Babyface has a point there.
Okay, I think that possibly we are boring our audience, and so we're going to try to create a little bit more excitement here, and I didn't mean to bore those people out there who might not be interested in listening to this tonight, but I thought that it would be interesting just to get into talking about some of these things that we need to be addressing, that is, on shows that can take the time to deal with this. Let's talk.
I mean, you really ought to get on Fundamentally Flawed. I think Alex has asked you, hasn't
He has. I was going to get on the other day, but we're in the midst of a meeting, and every time it doesn't work out. But he's a fantastic gentleman, and I hope that they can become somewhat a part of the New Covenant group. I would love to have just all of us coming together. We need to learn how to work as human beings together. And I think that it would be a wonderful time to talk about, being compassionist.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
So,
speaking of that term moves you a lot. What are your thoughts concerning that?
Well, here's what I like about here's what I like about the term compassionist. Several things. not the least of which is it has the word passion right in it, right? And it engenders everything that goes into what I envision somebody from a humanist perspective working towards, somebody from a human or person-centered approach working toward, somebody who has an empathic approach, what their goals would be the same kind of goals that all overlap into what a compassionist might have goals towards, and what they value and what they would commit to. And that's what I like about it.
Definitely on board with that. Definitely.
You know, I like the term so much better than humanist, and I love the term humanist a lot. I like the terms a secular humanist. But, you know, I think that in order to pull humanity together, we need a better term like compassionist, something that everyone can identify, both, you know, if you have both theists and atheists alike saying, you know, I want to be compassionate. And, I mean, who can argue against, you know, love?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If you were, so let's do a little thought experiment right now. So, Rhonda, if you were going to argue against a compassionist, what would you be arguing against?
I don't know. I don't think I would ever do that. I'm trying to pull something that would be really absurd to argue against.
Yeah, it's
we would use this book right here to argue against compassion.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Well, you know, he does have a good point about that. We could say, well, no, we can't say that. But there are many instances in the scripture itself where one or the other did not show themselves to be very compassionate. Now, Jesus himself, you know, he was all about compassion. And so if you're going to talk about compassion in relationship to the Bible, or what we call the Bible, then Jesus definitely is, you know, the main one to bring up. But it seems like when I say that, a lot of people always go to some asinine, well, he cursed the fig tree and that's not very compassionate. Well, they don't understand that. They have no idea what that meant, what that means, because they claim he's not very compassionate because he cursed a fig tree. And they say, well, what did the fig tree do to him? And I'm sure Babyface Fulford has that same argument.
Well, no, actually, I was going to talk about something else.
No, but I mean, I've heard you mention it before.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a useful, silly argument, but it's like when you can point out using the King James Version because of mistranslations Dr. Jones will talk about, you can show that Jesus wants you to go to hell if you use different parts of the text. As Dr. Jones pointed out, of course, it's based off of mistranslations. The only thing I could think of offhand would be something from the New Testament that got brought up on a discussion on the cult of honesty, where according to the text that was quoted, Jesus only allowed for 2 reasons to get divorced. Now, I'm sure there's a deeper understanding to be had there, and I'm not familiar with it personally, but these 2 reasons were for infidelity during the marriage or death. Something that I have some experience with is people who have been, and this is men and women, and who have been abused during relationships in various ways. And this person, now me as a compassionist or a humanist, whichever label you would wish to apply to me, that to me ends a marriage right there. That's one person taking a power position when they should not. And yeah, I have no problem with that person getting a divorce. And as time goes on, if they meet somebody who does truly care about them and is going to treat them well, then I would not tell them that if they were to remarry, they would commit adultery.
Well,
So, and I'm sure there is
but
understanding there,
let,
but that would be.
let's ask a fair question here, and I think that it would help the playing field a lot better, because I think that all of us would agree that these people who are anti-theist or anti-atheist are wrong. Would you agree with that, Christopher?
Oh, I totally agree, and I think that Babyface is speaking, truth to power when he speaks about the fact that being a compassionist, you would be against all of those things. So applying it to the Jesus described in the New Testament, I think is neither here nor there, because the thought experiment that I wanted to originally get to with Rhonda was, if you were to argue against compassionism, you would be arguing against being empathic.
Right.
You would be arguing against wanting to love somebody, wanting to welcome them, wanting to care for other humans, wanting to be compassionate. You'd be arguing against that. So it's like, by being a compassionist, by engaging in compassionism, you're putting yourself in a position that makes it difficult for people to take an alternate position against.
I will say that try to defend these people who will make these arguments. They believe they are being compassionate. And that would be something I would say, is that they do believe that what they are trying to do is the compassionate response. And it's something to understand, and that would be something that you have to understand as well if you're trying to get into this. To some
Sure.
people, and I'm running through a list of examples here, and I'm trying to use a good one. But when someone uses something, whether it's biblically based or not, to try to force another person into behavior they see fit, they believe they are being compassionate to them. And that's something that needs to be understood, I think.
Well, that video of Russell Brand interviewing two guys from Westboro Baptist Church, they really thought that, or think that they're being compassionate toward people when they say, you're going to hell if you do this or that, or if you promote this or that. They say, I love you so much, I'm telling you where you're going wrong. And just like Cy Tin Bruggencate and Eric Hovind, when they came here to the studio, Cy made these comments, I love you, and that's why I'm telling you that you're, X, Y, or Z. And so Michael does have a very good point about that. Just because, they claim compassion, I guess, doesn't mean you are compassionate. But they really, really, truly believe they're trying to help people save their lives and keep them out of a devil's hell.
I'd like to make a distinction here. I'd like to make a distinction between compassion, passive and activist compassion, right? Passive compassion is not wanting to control people in an attempt to prove your compassion. Activist compassion is wanting to control somebody's behavior in an attempt to prove to them how compassionate you are. That's the creepy kind.
Right.
We are not actively compassionate in the sense that we are wearing our compassion on our sleeve and actively going out to people that don't want what we're dishing out. We are just affording a place where compassionism is practiced. And if you should choose to need a place where a compassionate ear can be lent, we have a place for you.
Right.
But that's very different than going to a funeral with placards or placards that say really horrible things about a certain demographic of the United States. You know what I mean? That's an activist version of compassionism that I don't think is compassionate. I would much prefer for the former than the latter. A version of compassionism where my compassionism doesn't intrude on any of your rights.
One of the things that I have found, for instance, and I'm going to use this in analogy, if you're talking with someone who is an advocate of flat earth science, you can use their textbook over and over again, and you're not going to move very far. But if you offer them something different to look at, I think in a short period of time that they will move away from flat earth science. And I think that sometimes the strategy of using, let's say, these failed meta-languages of theology like this Holy Bible that I hold in my hand, I think these are the books that are keeping the againstness there. And I'm interested in cessation of againstness. I'm interested in people becoming compassionist. And I think that we can do this if we give something that is better to think about. In other words, if people become literate concerning the text that is capable of wrestling with what it says, that is, if they are going to deal with theists who are extremely overboard in all of these areas, would that not be a better way of disarming people rather than just saying, you're stupid or wrong?
Of course.
So,
I think there's a thirst for that.
I do too, and I think that we can start nuancing. We need to become compassionate. How do we do this? Let's take these horrible renditions of translation models of the Bible, and let's start reading the text for ourselves and start dealing with it adequately, like we have to deal with all kinds of other sciences. And let's give to the theists who misrepresent the text, let's give them something to think about that's more in concert with real science. And I think everything will change.
Oh yeah, and I think that it needs. I think that people, in order for people to hear that message, it's going to take more than evidence. It's going to take more than proof, and it's going to take more than debate forums.
I agree. I think it's going to take people doing more than the academic parts. I think it's going to take music. I think it's going to take gatherings like we have here in the studio, shows like this, and simply demonstrating things by the means of example, etc. And so, okay, I've got a question that can't be answered on the air. I need to take care of that. So why don't you take it further?
All righty. Now, I want to ask Michael Fulford, what do you think the difference is? And I know we've been to something in the no, it's not the town square, but at Seville Square that you were a part of, and it was having something to do with secular humanism. So what do you think the difference is between humanism and compassionism?
I can't think of any clear differences. I think it's just the same idea under a different label. I really don't think there's any real difference. My personal stance on things is, as a humanist, when I try to identify as a humanist, the things that I enjoy about the idea is, well, it's in the motto. It's inspired by, let me see if I can get this straight, inspired by art, motivated by compassion, and informed by science. And those three things, I think, are important. The idea that humans are really good at creating things that can inspire awe without any religious stance whatsoever. To me, a skyscraper, now there's a environmental argument you can make about how bad it is, and it's to me it is a valid argument. I'm not going to dispute it. But the fact that we can build something that is structurally so tall and sturdy that it can withstand tectonic shifting and all these other things, and that we can build that we have that capability, and then just use it as an office building. It's commonplace. There's a certain amount of amazement in that to me, that we can do that. We have a spacecraft leaving our solar system now. And those things, to me, that is a form of art. If you look at, and we do have a golden disc on this thing, which plays sounds of Earth, different ways of saying hello, and music, and all these other things. That is art. When the astronauts went to the moon, there's something called, and I recommend people look this up, the Lunar Art Museum. Little tiny samples of art that people made and is left on the moon. So art is a part of just being human. And the idea of compassion is recognizing that when we talk about science, we know we are beginning to understand better ways of taking care of each other, both physically and mentally. And that's going to continue. But with compassion, we must recognize that these ways of caring for other people do not work for everybody. And we have to do what works for the person. Because science is about statistics. It's looking at the broad picture. Statistically, most people, this works for. But when you deal with compassion, you don't deal with statistics. You deal with the individuals that you run into. And that's what's important to me.
That was a good response, Babyface.
Absolutely.
I liked it. Can I take a crack at that?
I want you to take a crack and, just get this thing going.
So the difference between secular humanism and compassionism for me is there doesn't need to be a secular and non-secular version of compassionism. It just is. You know what I mean? So compassionism just, you don't have to have a secular version. It doesn't need a modifier or a identifier like secularism or a secular version of it. It allows theists and atheists alike to let you know that wherever you are coming from, you're going to be heard.
Well, that's the humanist label.
Right.
That there is the humanist label itself. I specify as a secular humanist because I'm an atheist. There are religious humanists and there are non-religious humanists, and then there are just humanists. And there's been a split. It's not really because of one reason or another. I think that there's still this commonality between religious humanism and secular humanism, and it's all under that same banner. It's just, I think, really it came down to people who think the same way, like working with each other.
And I still like it, Babyface. It's just that the term humanism has so many connotations to it. Some people just say humanism and they mean secular humanism. Some people mean the religious version of humanism. Some people deny that humanism has any religious connotations to it whatsoever. If you were to listen to the interview that I had with John Shook, he would say that humanism doesn't have any religious connotations to it whatsoever. So it's kind of, it has its own baggage. And so just by saying you're a compassionist, or that you engage in compassionism, to me, it disarms you into breaking down these walls between theism and atheism. Right. And it doesn't have a focus on science, and it doesn't have a focus on the Bible, and it doesn't have a focus on, this versus that, or there is no verses. It's just and. There's no but. There's and I like that.
That's wonderful. That is so wonderful. One of the things that I think that we need to do as human beings is learn. Hello. Okay, Joey broke it again. And so tonight's a test night, but I think that sometimes we wear out terms. And some of these terms have been used in debates, they've been used in several venues, and they have offended people. And I think that we need to be willing to move on. In other words, so many people have been offended in the theistic community by the term humanism. And this thing has been used in so many ways, and I think that we need new terms. That is, if we are going to come together, if we're really struggling and willing to say, let's create a new page, let's create a new age, let's create something that we can all embrace and move forward. We don't have to stay stuck on, say, particular phonemes. I mean, how ridiculous to get stuck on one or two phonemes. It's better to keep moving forward.
Yes, I guess more appropriately, we would be changeists.
Since you got to preaching there for a while, I would like for you to finish that sermon. That was very good, by the way.
Well, about compassionism.
That's exactly what I'm asking about, because I think that, we have many theists listening to you saying, amen, preach on, preach on, preach on. They need to hear that from atheists. And as a theist, I can say that if we are going to come together, we need not just theists, but we need atheists stepping up to the plate saying, yes, we must come together. This is about a wrestling match, not about being against each other. But this is a wrestling match about saying, hey, we can work together, we can live together, we can look at the same evidence, we can have diversity, but we can have such compassion for each other that we can keep moving forward together. And there's no reason to create these walls or lines of division or these issues that we see often in church life. 38,000 different denominations. It's nonsense.
Who can argue? Who can argue against progress? Who can argue against moving forward? Who can argue against this isn't just a hobby. This isn't just okay, it's that time of the week for me to watch my 50-minute New Covenant group show. No, that's not how this works. It works like this. The people that are interested in what's going on right here and right now are the kind of people that want to come together for one reason or another. And the kind of reason that we would like people to be coming together for is to break down the pre-existing walls that exist in our culture. Now, the reason why we are having these discussions is mostly focused around bringing together theists and atheists, and those are the walls that we're breaking down. But who doesn't want to live in a world where those kinds of walls are broken down in most arenas, such that Republican, Democrat, Independent, those walls are broken down. Ethnicity, the walls of ethnicities are broken down. The walls of gender bias are broken down. The walls of any walls that exist are broken down, and it has to start somewhere. And this isn't some pie-in-the-sky hippie commune, that we're talking about. We're talking brass tacks. We're talking about something that exists right now on Ustream that we are all a part of, and we're asking people and we're inviting people into this world of Compassionism. And in case they're wondering, what's the New Covenant group all about? What's this Compassionism thing? This is it right now. It is us talking, atheists and theists, about looking past the fact that there is such a thing as atheism or theism, so that we can share recipes on red gravy and escargot soup, and not let the fact that our versions of origins are different from each other. There are more important things to move forward with than nitpicking the details of the pea that's at the bottom of 1,000 mattresses. You know what I mean?
Well, what would we say to people that would tell us, hey, you're just really stating the obvious, because everyone should be compassionate? I mean, who is not compassionate?
Good. Put it into action. Put it into action. Why is Christmas only? Why are people nice to each other only once a year at Christmas? Isn't everybody stating the obvious? Like, wow, this should be like this every day of every year. Good. State the obvious. Put it into action. Pay it forward. Go.
Now, right now, we are in the midst of having a brand new revival. It just started with the evangelist Christopher Maute. He's on a roll preaching, and a question just came in, and he needs to answer this, namely in his sermon. Progress to where? Where are you telling us to go, Christopher? Preach on.
Progress is going to be determined by each individual based on what values you have for yourself and how committed you are to them. The goals that I have for myself might be different than the goals that somebody has for themselves, but those goals denote a progress and growth towards those goals. The goals that I have are to be happy and to make my wife happy and to live in a world where the happiness that we have for each other can be realized. So, that's not going to be a world where I am going to worry about this, that, or the other because somebody who has a different opinion than me is keeping me awake at night. No.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would rather live in a world where somebody whose opinion is different than mine, I have a forum and a platform from which I'm comfortable enough to communicate with that person and correspond and get off of my chest and resolve any issues that I have. I want to live in that world. But that world doesn't really exist everywhere in the world that I currently live in. So I'm making that world.
Right now you have a lot of people saying amen. You've got people's attention. Now my question is, why don't you give an altar call? Not like the church gives, not something that says you need to get saved, but give us some options, the kind of options that would say, hey, this is how we can do it. We can do it together. Preach on.
Well, it's very obvious how we can do it together. It can't be done by any one individual. You know, I'm the noob, all right? Alex Greco and myself, we're the noobs at the New Covenant group. But you know, I've been particularly on fire lately for NCG and the cult of honesty, and I like to take the ideas that we talk about here and generate charts and paragraphs and writings and things like that. And I bother. For those of you that don't know behind the scenes, oh my goodness, I can't even speak English right now. I'm so hyped up. I bother Rhonda and Dr. Jones to the nth degree, as well as Bob and Greg and Joey, with like all of these ideas that I have to organize the wonderful potential that the New Covenant group has. And I can't do it alone. And the way that we're going to move forward together is by not having this as a secret. This can't be your guilty pleasure or your secret thing that you do on Sundays. This has to be the kind of thing that you are so comfortable with. This has to be a value that you commit to the point where it's like, tell a friend. Let them know how cool this is. If you know people that are into the kind of discussions that we have, they're into the kind of discussions that you have, because obviously you're watching this right now, then tell them about this. Oh, you like that kind of discussion too? You have those kinds of questions too? I know somewhere where we can talk about that, and it's cool. And the people that talk about it know what they're talking about. They're not going to make you feel stupid. And if you know anyone else who's interested in this kind of conversation, come and check it out. And I think that their minds will be blown. I think that your mind will be blown at the fact that their mind will be blown, and then my mind will be blown.
Yeah. I think that atheists and theists alike are tired of being institutionalized. And we just received a comment concerning how can we keep the NCG from being so institutional? How can we keep it organic? Preach on.
Well, you have to keep it organic by listening to what the people have to say and allowing for change.
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I mean, change has to happen. And the things that we are talking about tonight, they're marvelous and they're wonderful, but they need to change for the next week and the next week. I mean, we've got to keep moving forward. And I think we're on the right path, and I think we have the right group of people to help us do that. And I'm looking forward to it.
I am too, and I'm excited to hear atheists like Christopher Maute simply preaching in this kind of context. And I keep using that term because I want so bad. I want for theists to understand that atheists have something so wonderful to offer the conversation and life itself. And so many theists have said, no, I don't need atheists. I need them to become like me. And that's so poor. That's a tragic thought.
Right.
And so the New Covenant group is about rising above that notion. And so get involved in the New Covenant group. It's about, sometimes I want to rise so far above my theism and the concepts of atheism simply because we need to explore what it really means to be human and actually deal with the human condition in an honest way. And I don't think that we have made it there yet, but we can move in that direction.
All right, Babyface, what do you think?
Well, I was going to ask Christopher if a way of making what he wants a little shorter would be to say, to have a world in which the joy of an individual does not come at the cost of the joy of another person.
That's exactly right. That's a perfect way of putting it.
I don't usually manage to actually shorten things, so I'm glad about that.
Well, do it more often. That was great.
It was nice and concise.
Nice. I want to bring something up. We're a little bit off topic, but we did speak of this recently on the show about Fundamentally Flawed and Alex Botten. And I think he had a goal for himself for the weekend to get, I'm going to say, 3 people to admit that he was God. And I thought it was so cool. He used their the pre-suppers' arguments against them. And this is one person that he posted. And the rigmarole, they say, how do you know about this, blah, 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 ad nauseam.
Is there anything that you could be that you're absolutely certain about? And he goes, yes, I am absolutely certain that I am not God that you worship.
Right. He says, I know with 100% certainty and with 0 chance of being wrong that I am not the God you worship. And then the pre-supper says, how do you know? You could be self-deluded into thinking that. And so, therefore, you just may as well be God. I mean, using their own argument, can't think outside the box, have to go by the, step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and get caught up in this spider web of ignorance. It's funny.
The next thing you know, you are in a position as a pre-supper of arguing that the person that you're talking to might be the God that you worship.
Right. You're actually making an argument
which puts you
for
in the
that.
most absurd position.
Right, exactly. And when I saw that, I'm thinking how pitifully poor.
It is, but it seems like that particular theist he was talking to or writing to could do nothing but parrot.
That's what it is.
And they can't break out of that little box and start thinking. And I think that it's not just theists who are parroting, but I find that atheists also are trying to do the same thing.
Sure.
And I think that both sides are creating these evangelists that are exaggerating everything. And I think that we need to put down, not put each other down, but simply drop the notion of anti-theism or anti-atheism and say, let's just do away with that notion and let's simply think about a term that we can all relate to. And this is the thing that I love about that term, compassionist. We can all be compassionist and start talking about that. And then, to be honest with you, Christopher, when I talk to you, I never think about you being some kind of atheist. It just doesn't come up. No. And why do you think that is?
Because I'm awesome.
He's an awesomist.
That's true.
That's what it is.
An awesomist.
I'm totally kidding. That was a joke. We don't really bring up things that we argue about. We rarely have a discussion where we have a core disbelief that actually gets stuck in one another's craw. And I think that's the place from which people need to be coming from. Because we don't focus on our differences. I think that's really what it comes down to.
You're saying that we're not struggling with our differences. We're simply connecting and finding what we have in common and moving from there. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we're learning from each other. We have great conversations, and I just don't see a situation where, you bust my chops about being a theist, about you being a theist and me being an atheist, and I bust your chops about you being a theist and me being an atheist, and it never gets to a point where it's like, whoa, hold on, buddy, stepped over a line,
Right.
because we both trust each other, and I guess that's what it really comes down to. We both trust each other that when we are going to kid with each other, that it's never going to go so far that the other person is going to take advantage of the other person's trust. And it is a naive trust a little bit, in the same sense that when you start busting somebody's chops, you don't know how far they're going to take it, but it's never gone too far. So I've had no reason for red flags to go up. So the trust, the implicit trust and the naive trust that I've placed in you in the past apparently has been gone into gentle and appropriate hands. And so hopefully that you feel the same way in the interactions that you've had with me.
We absolutely do, and I like the term that you're using here. It's an issue of trust. And so often I think that the term trust is almost thrown to the side in conversations. And I think that there's something about learning how to take that step. That is to say, I'm a compassionist. I need to find someone that I can talk with and move forward with. And I can actually say, I need to trust someone. And it is, in a sense, a blind trust, isn't it?
It is. It's a feeling that you get. Some people, you get that feeling, and some people you don't. But it is, at first it's about social dynamics, but it's about being open at first to see who is out there. What does life have? What hand is life dealing you? And being open to it.
What would you say to those people who are extremely socially awkward, who really have had problems in their past and they can't trust anyone, and they're not willing to, get involved with something like what you're talking about? What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing that I would say is, fortunately, we have a Facebook page where you don't even have to use a picture of yourself or even your real name. Come join us and just see what we have to say. You don't even have to contribute at first. You can just see what kind of interactions the people that are interested in posting have to say. And you can just check it out, take our temperature. And then, if there are things that you dig, post something every once in a while. You might like it. And then see how generous people are with posts of people that are new to the community. And then next thing you know, you might realize how good you are at contributing things and how valued your opinion is and how interested people are in hearing what you have to say. Excuse me. That might become addictive because people like to get heard, and we like to listen.
I think that Michael is enjoying his new name, or am I wrong? Do you like Babyface?
Come on, BF.
Oh, Joey is saying it's a mobster name. I mean,
Yeah, he's never the mobster that lives to the end of the movie, though.
he's never the mobster that lives to the end of the movie.
One thing I was kind of thinking, you're talking about trust earlier. When you watch the media here in the U.S., you're really trained not to trust people. You don't trust your neighbor. You don't trust your family necessarily. You don't trust the people around you. With the current fallout from things from the various churches, we're not trusting the people in our church necessarily if you go to church. There are a lot of things not to trust. And there's good reasons not to trust, to be skeptical about things. But I do think that we're at the point now to where we need to learn to trust one another again.
Yes.
Right. Very good.
Yeah, I live in a
Wow.
city. I'm not gonna tell the dude who's sitting on the subway next to me to hold on to my wallet while I walk to the next car. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm gonna have an open mind, but not so open that my brains fall out.
Well,
know,
they had that test a while back where they put wallets all over New York City with money and with pictures, and a large number of them were returned to the people with the money and everything still in them.
Good on them.
So
Yeah.
Good
I
on
do
them.
I do think that
Excellent.
we kind of overestimate how cynical people are.
I believe that. I really believe for the majority that people are good people. And I think you start out good, and maybe life will throw you a few lemons, and some people can make the lemonade, and some people just get a sourpuss. So it's terrible.
Well, we have enjoyed tonight with you, Christopher, and also Babyface Michael Fulford. This has been fun tonight, to be honest with you.
Babyface.
And Jack is in the back laughing. I am enjoying his laughter.
Yeah,
So
well, I'll
is-
be taking you out back latest.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know whether Michael wanted to show off his face, because the bottom, his chin looks very much like Greg Bray. And so they are possibly identical, possibly twins or something like that. Now, Joey wants to come up here. Okay, you want to get the
Oh,
chin?
they're gonna get a
We're going to get a
close-up.
close-up of Babyface Fulford. Okay,
Oh, BFF.
here we go.
It's a very gangster name.
I hope everyone is watching because this is awesome.
Does that mean I got to get a piece now?
What's that, Jack? And he did it.
Okay, let's switch it. What is
I
that?
think Joey's impressed with it.
Okay,
I don't know. Oh,
John Travolta,
Oh, I was going to say
I've heard
Kirk
that.
Douglas.
Kurt Douglas. Yeah,
Comic book, like a little Jay Leno with a little Kirk Douglas mixed in.
Jay Leno?
Well, he said, what'd you say? Oh, never mind.
yeah, Joey's getting
Captain
insulting
America.
again, and so we're going to have to convert him, Christopher. You know, he needs to become a compassionist. He's been raising a lot of hell tonight in the studio.
Who's that,
But,
Babyface?
No, Joey.
Joey will be a compassionist. That's an easy sell.
Yeah. Why don't you do us a favor? Why don't you play the bass something smooth and just right off the cuff, sing something about being a compassionist before we.
Sing something about being a compassionist.
Yeah, just make
That's
it
a
up
lot
as
of
you go
pressure.
along.
A lot of pressure.
Come on, you can do it. You're awesome, right?
Are you ready?
Just pull it together. Go for it. Put some words to it.
You want some words, huh?
Yeah.
All I got is the silliest lyrics in my head right now. My head, yes, I have more than one brain. You gotta love, baby. Oh yeah. To be a compassionist. Not talking baby face. Cause it comes too easy for some people. You know what I'm talking about, Michael Fulford? I'm talking to you, baby face. Compassion. It's got passion right in the middle of the word right there. I'm talking compassion, yeah. Baby face. Compassion.
Well, that was wonderful. That was really good. Well, tonight we've had a lot of fun. What are your final thoughts, honey?
Well, I'm glad we kind of we didn't run the gamut on everything, but I'm glad I'm glad you had your little
We had
Hebrew
Bible study.
Bible study.
You
that
got bored, didn't you?
I don't want to lie to the people. I was bored just a little bit, but but that's my problem. That's not your problem. That's my problem. And we talked about compassion, and we talked about fundamentally flawed, and we gave information concerning Alex Botton's wife and needing help. And, you know, if you are compassionate, you will try to find information out for this couple to take care of that. And so I'm glad. I like to talk about a lot of different things, you know,
Right.
kind of like a little potpourri going on.
I agree. And if you know of a charity, once again, that can help Alex and Catherine, just give us a call so we can get in contact with them, or contact them yourself. We certainly will put you in contact with them. They do need some help here. And you know, this is what the New Covenant group is about. It's about learning how to help one another move forward. We're so excited about the documentary that we're making. By the way, it's going to be second to none. It's an awesome project. We're getting excited about all of the filming things that we're putting together here, all the rigging that's come together, and we're still trying to raise enough money to complete the project. But we've already started the project. But it's amazing. It's awesome. And so we are moving forward together. And so before we end the show, Babyface, Michael Fulford, would you say a thing or two?
Say a thing?
A thing or two?
A thing.
All right,
Okay.
next.
Well, I was going to try to do a rhyme. I'm terrible at rhymes because it makes my head hurt. The best I could come up with, compassionist, means more than being an atheist or a theist. It's rhyme, but it ain't got no time to it, so I don't know.
Well, it's a true statement.
So
That's the important thing.
thank you for that.
Final thoughts, Christopher.
Well, somebody had asked the audience, moving forward to where? Well, wait. We still have a couple more months left in this year. We have a documentary that's going to be filmed, starting filming. We have Dr. Shook that's coming to do a little on-site visit, on-location visit. There are wonderful things coming on the horizon for a New Covenant group, Cult of Honesty. I think that it's going to be wonderful to see the progress that is made and how we move forward together to achieve each of our goals that we are committed to and value.
Fantastic.
That is awesome. One of the things that I wanted to do tonight, because he's always wanting to have the last word, and tonight I just wanted to be very, very kind to him. I wanted to ask Joey to give us the last word, and he will end the show. So here's Joey.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Can you give me a little bit of house volume there so I can be reassured that I'm being heard here? That's lovely, Christopher. Thank you. The thing that I would like to emphasize, first of all, is that I am supposed to be given the last word in the evening show so that I can announce the upcoming programs. But that's okay. Thank you. We would like to thank everybody for being with us tonight and just exploring the ideas that we explored tonight concerning Compassionism, the New Covenant group, the direction we're going, etc. I want to thank Hero Chin, Michael Fulford, for joining us tonight. And also I want to thank Christopher Maute and his nubbins for joining us. Thank you. And we will see you next week. Don't forget to join us Wednesday night for the Unconventional Pastor and Dr. Jones to follow. And then Sunday we will be doing it all day long, just like we did today, from 10 to 10. And until then, we love you.
Thank you again, Christopher. You did an amazing job.
Well, thank you.